Hear, O Yasharal, the great I am, the great spirit, is the only power for you. The great I am, the great spirit is one. Speak peace into the ears of the people so that they could see on this day of rest. Rise, O Yasharal. Welcome to World War III. Our reference today will be the Antiquities of the Jews, Book 8, Chapter 1, Section 5, Josephus, the Hebrew historian. And this title will be Biblical Service versus United States Slavery. What is the difference? The quickest answer is they are not the same. Many have gone far and wide to teach the justification of United States slavery. Thereby, justified slavery means no form of repair or remedy belongs to the descendants of slaves. Taxation without representation is the phrase many know and have been taught to love right here in the District of Columbia. The Negroes themselves were specifically this head tax during slavery, as here defined. And I will be using Webster's Dictionary 1828 because my people were held hostage and captives as slaves here during that time. I don't want to use a more modern version because the English language changes, whereas Hebrew doesn't. The English language changes during time. They add for so many different languages and countries. Anyhow, service. Well, let's go to slave first. What is a slave? A slave is a person who is wholly subject to the will of another. One who has no will of his own, but whose person and services are wholly under the control of another. That means slave is your person and your services. So that means, let's go to service. Service, as defined, in a general sense, labor or body or of body and mind, perform at the command of a superior, or the pursuance of duty for the benefit of another. Service is voluntary or involuntary. And again, here with Webster's Dictionary, you'll see that the two definitions are different. So a slave, it has an involuntary will. Like someone puts upon that person is wholly under the control of another person, sort of say. Whereas service, you can give your service to somebody voluntarily, or some human trafficking, murdering, lying thieves could come and involuntarily take it from you. Next thing, the Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 8, or book 8, Salakia. Book 8, chapter 1, Judas the Galanite. Now here he is with Zadok, a Pharisee, and they wanted to revolt. This is Josephus, his Histories of the Jews, the Antiquity. It's this guy named Judas and this Pharisee named Zadok. And they who both said that taxation was no better than the introduction of slavery. So they're against slavery right here in the book of Josephus, saying that taxation is slavery. Another reference in the Antiquities of the Jews, book 8, chapter 1, section 5, the Essenes. And Josephus talks about 4 sects of Hebrewisms, I'll say. Essenes is one of them. And they were not, as noted here, they were not desirous to keep servants. thinking that it would tempt men to be unjust. So this is the Hebrew historian during and around the time of Christ, around the time of the Messiah, that first century, that these people had no pleasure in being slaves. They had no pleasure in having slaves. Josephus, the Hebrew historian, makes reference to Pilate in chapter 1 of these antiquities. He makes reference to Pilate, and he says that Pilate wanted to abolish the Mosaic law and set up images or effigies to Caesar by deception. So Pilate brought those during the nighttime. He brought those images into the temple. When the Hebrews, the Jewish people, sort of say, the original people of the book, I won't say Jewish again. That's something modern that don't even belong in the Bible. Pilate brought in these effigies, these images into the temple by deception during night, so that he can pollute and violate Hebrew worship. Now, what do you think taxation and these dollar bill images is today? What do you think the United States government company is doing? Let's keep going. The Jewish religious peoples today have claimed inheritance of the people of the book and the Hebrewisms that they practiced in old times. The Bible itself is a law for the Hebrews. One more time. The Bible itself is a law for the Hebrews. The people of the book did not look at their own Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters and called them animals meant for perpetual service. They didn't do that. Nor do you read in the Lashon Kodash, Salakia, nor do you read in the Lashon Kodash, the Holy Tongue, also known as the Holy Scriptures for some of you. You don't read in the Bible how the United States slave masters used black babies for alligator bait. It's not in the Bible how the United States slave masters made shoes and clothing from the skin of murdered slaves. Neither will you see in the Bible how the United States slave masters raped their own mulatto children, then sold them for a barrel of wine. You don't see that in a holy tongue, nor in a holy nation, not in Hebrewisms. The holy tongue of our Hebrew Israelite ancestors was full of purpose-driven service. Father Abraham made a treaty with his most aged servant to go and find a like-minded wife for his son among his nation, so that Father Isaac can continue in the Hebrewisms of his father. Now, let the Jewish Encyclopedia speak for itself. The Jewish Encyclopedia on Agriculture. You will find this documented quote. The Jewish Encyclopedia, the unedited full text of the 1906 Jewish Encyclopedia, quote, "In fact, the cotton plantations in many parts of the South were wholly in the hands of the Jews," speaking of Jewish people, because the Negroes, the true Hebrew Israelites, were enslaved at that time. Again, I will finish the quote. "In fact, the cotton plantations in many parts of the South were wholly in the hands of the Jews. And as a consequence of slavery, found its advocates among them. So the Jews, the Jewish people, today, their descendants, the Jewish people who are calling themselves Jews, they are the advocates of slavery. And they were in charge of it. With this direct quote lingering in your minds, I want to awaken many of you to the national broadcasting companies, the NBC News, their segment on the slave Bible. Again, the people mostly in charge of slavery subtracted from the Bible to maintain slaves. Why would they do that? Adding and subtracting from the holy scriptures, it's holy. Adding and subtracting from the holy scriptures is sin. But yet the people who were in charge of slavery took away from the Bible. During this time, the general's orders of a postbellum general of the armies, his name was William Tecumseh Sherman, if I pronounced that right. General Sherman gave this special field order number 15, known to the black community as 40 acres and a mule. Civil laws of a governing company denied these orders that would have given land and prosperity and prosperity to former slaves, now called African descendants of slaves. Again, here, the people who were involved in maintaining civil orders over slaves took prosperity away from former slaves and their descendants. Yet with President Abraham Lincoln's own hand, you will read slave masters were in violation of civil order. They were in violation. Writing in favor, again, Abraham Lincoln was writing in favor of giving untaxed land to the slaves. Now, taxes were not being mentioned in his writing, but he was in favor of it. I'm going to put all these links down in the description section. You can look these things up for yourself. Now, for an example, I'll give you an example. The Jarwa people, and these people are off the coast of India. These people are a black people, and they are still indigenous autochthons of their land. Like, they are still indigenous and are a peaceful people among themselves until foreign invasion comes. Folks, biblical slavery, which is employment, does not compare to the United States institution of chattel slavery. The Negro, who are the true Hebrews, under a United States justification system, are hostages to an unrelenting ideology. And if you're still not unsure about blacks or Africa being Hebrews, the Jewish historian Josephus will tell you that the sons of Abraham named Africa. But that's not the point that I want to make. The point that I want to make is that without a peace treaty, democracy is death. Death in democracy, which is majority rule, is possible at any moment for a black person walking the streets. The Negro, the true Hebrew Israelites, under this justification of slavery, are hostages That's the point that I wanted to make. And what is a hostage? A person delivered to an enemy or a hostile power. We have no remedy here. We can walk out in these streets at any moment and get shot by human trafficking, murdering, lying, racist police officer. And their governing officials, their police chiefs across the nation will find some type of way to say that they were doing their job. In fact, they have the escalation of force in this country. They have no remedy. They don't have to look at a former slave or a slave for that matter and try to protect them. It's in their laws. Again, all of these references will be put down in the description section. You guys go check it out yourselves. And also visit us on Facebook. And if you want to make a donation to our cause here at Indigenous Hebrew Israelite Awakening, we make treaty with anyone who suggests doing so. May peace run throughout the entire earth, because that's what true Hebrews look for. I'm going to end this lecture by saying that I am an Indigenous Hebrew Israelite. I'm also a conscientious objector, a minister of peace. Hebrew Israelite out.